is Mr. Harry Styles!
They were just two boys in a band, young, wide-eyed, thrown into a world of fame, cameras, and screaming fans. But from the very beginning, something felt different. When Harry Styles and Louis Tomlinson first stood on the same stage, no one could have predicted the chaos, the devotion, the speculation that would follow. To the outside world, they were simply bandmates. But to millions of fans, their connection was undeniable, tangible, electric. There were the looks, the touches, the quiet moments caught on shaky cameras, the glances that lasted just a second too long. And suddenly, a theory was born, a secret romance hidden in plain sight, a love story the world wasn't supposed to see. As One Direction rose to unstoppable fame, the rumors only grew louder. Interviews were controlled, questions were avoided, and somewhere along the way, the two drifted apart, physically, publicly, but maybe not emotionally. And then came the music. Lyrics filled with longing, regret, hope, words that felt too personal, too intertwined, too familiar to ignore. Two voices singing separate songs, yet telling one story. So what really happened between Harry Styles and Louis Tomlinson? Was it just friendship or something far more complicated? Was there a secret life, a hidden love, beneath the spotlight? Today, we dive deep into the most whispered theory in modern pop culture. This is the story of Harry Styles and the life he may be hiding from the world. Before he became a global icon, he was just a 16-year-old boy from Holmes Chapel with dimples, charm, and a voice that melted through auditions. Harry Styles walked onto the X Factor stage in 2010 with a bakery job on his resume and a dream in his eyes. He didn't win the competition, but he won something bigger. The birth of One Direction turned him into an overnight sensation. 5 boys, handpicked by Simon Cowell, thrown into the hurricane of fame. And at the center of it all, Harry. He was magnetic, effortlessly charismatic, the cheeky one, the flirt, the frontman, the one the cameras always seemed to find. From stadium tours to sold-out arenas, from award shows to red carpets, Harry's image was carefully shaped before the world's eyes. His curls, his smile, the effortless confidence. He was the heartthrob of a generation, adored by millions, idolized by fans, dissected by tabloids. But as the band matured, so did Harry. The boyish charm slowly gave way to something else, something harder to define. He became quieter in interviews, more thoughtful, more elusive. While others opened up, Harry pulled back, wrapping himself in an aura of mystery. He didn't just want to be famous, he wanted to be free. When One Direction split and the members went their separate ways, many wondered what would become of him. But Harry didn't just survive, he evolved. His solo debut was a revelation. Rock influences, poetic lyrics, tailored suits, painted nails, gender-fluid fashion. He refused to be boxed in that no longer just a pop star. He was becoming something more, an artist. A symbol, a statement. Harry didn't explain himself. He didn't label his sexuality. He didn't respond to every headline or theory. And in that silence, the mystery only deepened. He became a master of contradiction. Bold, yet private, playful, yet guarded. A man who could stand in a dress on the cover of Vogue, yet speak in riddles about love and heartbreak. The more he gave the world, the more it wanted to know. Who is Harry Styles really? Is he the rebel icon pushing boundaries, or the deeply sensitive soul hiding behind metaphors? Is he the open book he appears to be, or is there a chapter we've never read? And that's where our story takes a turn. Because behind the lights, behind the red carpets and platinum records, some believe there's a love story he never told. A part of his past he never let go of. A connection that may have started long before the world was watching. It began with 5 strangers, thrown together by chance or fate or television. Harry Styles, Louis Tomlinson, Zayn Malik, Liam Payne, and Niall Horan. They didn't know it then, but in 2010, on that stage at the X Factor, they weren't just forming a boy band. They were lighting the spark of something much bigger. One Direction became a cultural phenomenon. They weren't just popular, they were everywhere. And at the very center of the frenzy were 2 of its youngest members, Harry and Louis. In the early days, they were inseparable. There was a lightness between them, an ease, a magnetic energy that fans noticed immediately. Harry was the soft-spoken flirt, Louis the loud, quick-witted prankster. But together, they seemed to balance each other. They laughed at the same jokes, shared clothes, sat just a little too close. And when the cameras rolled, they didn't pull back. They leaned in. To many fans, this wasn't just friendship. It was chemistry, a connection that felt too natural to be staged, too emotional to be scripted. They started calling it Larry Stylinson. At first, it was just a ship name, a playful merging of their identities. But over time, it evolved into a full-blown theory, a belief system, a digital movement. To believers, Harry and Louis weren't just close friends. They were in love, and they were being forced to hide it. Clips began to surface, moments caught during interviews, lingering stares, secret smiles, inside jokes whispered behind hands. Fans analyzed their body language frame by frame. Every glance became a clue. Every lyric, a confession. Every silence, a cover-up. They pointed to tweets, now deleted, where Louis called Harry the boy who makes me laugh until I cry. To photos of matching tattoos, arrows, ropes, birds flying toward one another. To a particular moment at a concert, when Louis gazed at Harry and mouthed, "Always in my heart." It was more than coincidence, they said. It was storytelling, real-life poetry, unfolding under the scrutiny of the world, yet hidden just out of reach. And yet, something changed. As the band grew bigger, Harry and Louis seemed to grow further apart. Their public interactions became colder, more formal. They stopped standing next to each other at interviews. Fans noticed how often they were separated during tours, how rarely they were allowed to speak directly. It felt orchestrated, controlled. Then came the statements. Louis, in a rare moment of anger, called the Larry rumors bullshit. Harry, more evasive, danced around the topic, saying he didn't want to label relationships or people. But for many, the damage or the erasure was already done. To some, this distancing was proof. Someone didn't want the truth to come out. Management, label executives, a culture that wasn't ready. And that's when the Larry fandom grew even louder. Tumblr exploded with fan theories, deep dives into interviews, side-by-side analysis of lyrics. Some claimed there were hidden messages in the liner notes of albums. Others believed they were being silenced, that mentions of Larry were scrubbed from YouTube comments, that tweets were mysteriously deleted, that publicists were working overtime to keep them apart. To outsiders, it sounded like conspiracy. But to believers, it felt like the only explanation. Because how else do you explain the closeness? The connection that flickered through every camera lens in those early days? How do you write it off as coincidence when so many moments felt real? Was it projection? Was it wishful thinking? Or was it the world catching glimpses of something beautiful and painful and hidden? The truth is, One Direction was never just a band. It was a story that a world fans lived inside. And for many, Larry Stylinson was the heart of it, the secret narrative beneath the noise. A love story told in glances, in songs, in coded language, waiting to be understood. But even as fans clung to the idea of Larry, Harry and Lewis never publicly embraced it. And maybe they couldn't. Maybe the world they lived in, the contracts, the cameras, the expectations, made honesty impossible. Or maybe, just maybe, the truth was never meant for us. There's something almost sacred about privacy, especially when you're young, vulnerable, and standing in front of the world. Harry Styles and Louis Tomlinson were barely out of school when the spotlight found them. They didn't have time to prepare. One day, they were boys with dreams. The next, they were pop culture royalty, dissected by cameras, headlines, and millions of eyes. Every move they made was recorded, shared, analyzed. There was no manual for that.No warning. In the whirlwind of fame, people forget they were human first. So if there was something real between them, something more than friendship, how would they have handled it? Could they have handled it? Imagine this. Two teenagers, drawn to each other in a way they couldn't fully explain, falling in love under the harshest lights possible. Every smile they exchanged, every time they brushed hands, was magnified, turned into spectacle, into gossip, into a theory, into content. What should have been soft and sacred became public and performative. If they were in love, or even exploring something close to it, it wasn't just personal. It was political. Danger's Point One Direction wasn't just a band, it was a brand. A billion-dollar empire. Their images were curated, sold, and consumed. And within that machine, there was no space for ambiguity. No space for truth, if that truth threatened the fantasy. Management teams stepped in, contracts were signed. Interviews were monitored, questions were off limits. Fans were told to stop speculating. But the more they were told, the more they wondered. Because the silences spoke louder than the words. Because when Louis suddenly stopped being seen near Harry, it didn't feel organic, it felt strategic. Because when their Twitter interaction stopped, when their jokes ended, when their warmth seemed replaced by awkward distance, it hurt. And not just the fans, it seemed to hurt them too. There are videos where Louis's smile fades the moment a Larry question is asked. There are interviews where Harry chooses every word like he's walking through fire. There are concert moments where they glance at each other across the stage, but never approach. Like they're under orders. Like getting too close would ruin everything. And maybe it would have. Because what if the truth didn't fit the narrative? What if two boys in love was too risky, too messy, too uncontrollable for a carefully constructed global image? What if someone, somewhere high up, decided that their story wasn't marketable enough? That their story had to be rewritten? What they might have been hiding wasn't just a relationship. It was vulnerability. It was identity. It was love in its most fragile, unguarded form. And yet, even as the years passed, even as they moved further and further apart in public, there were things that never stopped. Fans noticed the tattoos, arrows pointing at each other when they stood side by side. Fans noticed the lyrics, Harry's aching confessions of solitude and silence, Louis's subtle lines about missing someone he can't name. Fans noticed the interviews, how neither of them ever completely closed the door. They denied the theory, yes, but they never killed the emotion. Louis once said it affected his real-life relationships. That the rumors were invasive. That it wasn't real. But to many, the sadness in his voice spoke volumes. He wasn't angry at the idea. It seemed like he was angry it had gotten out of control. And Harry, he never got angry, he just smiled softly. Avoided direct answers. Let the mystery live. What they might have been hiding wasn't a scandal. It was something gentle, something true, something that, maybe, didn't survive the pressure. Because not every love story ends in a happy ending. Some end in silence. Some end in sacrifice. Some end not because the love is gone, but because the world never gave it a chance to breathe. And in that silence, a fandom kept listening, kept hoping, kept believing that behind all the noise, behind the brands and albums and headlines, there was still a part of Harry and Lewis that remembered what it felt like before the world got too loud. When words can't be spoken out loud, they often find another way out. For artists, that way is music. For Harry Styles and Louis Tomlinson, many fans believe it was the only place where truth could live, softly, quietly, without permission. A coded language written between the lines. A whisper of what once was. Or what could have been. After One Direction paused in 2016, each member stepped into the light alone. And with their debut solo albums came something no longer filtered by management, no longer written by committee. This was their voice, their pen, their truth. And that's when things started to feel personal. Let's start with Harry. His self-titled debut in 2017 was not the glossy, bubblegum pop many expected. It was raw, vintage, lyrical, full of ache, vulnerability, and intimacy. And right at the heart of it was a song called Sweet Creature. Sweet Creature had another talk about where it's going wrong. We're still young, I always think about you, and how we don't speak enough. It's soft, introspective, a conversation between two souls who've grown apart, but never stopped thinking about each other. To many fans, this wasn't just a breakup song. It was the song, the one that captured the quiet, unspoken sadness between Harry and Lewis, the ache of distance that fame created. The title itself, Sweet Creature, was something Lewis had once tweeted about Harry, long before the cameras got too close. And then came two ghosts. We're not who we used to be. We're just two ghosts standing in the place of you and me. It's a haunting image, two people still there, but hollow, unrecognizable. The fire gone, but the memory still burning in the walls. Many believe it references their lost closeness. Some even point to Harry's handwriting in the liner notes, calling it his most painful track. Years later, Harry released Falling, and it struck a deeper chord than ever. What if I'm someone I don't want around? What if I'm someone you won't talk about? This wasn't just heartbreak, that it was self-blame, regret, a man grappling with who he had become and what he had lost in the process. There's no name in the lyrics, but the emotion was unmistakable, and fans couldn't help but wonder, who is Harry singing to when he sounds this devastated? But the conversation wasn't one-sided. Louis Tomlinson began to release music that, while less mainstream, was just as emotionally charged, if not more. His song Habit carries a weight that feels undeniably personal. You're the habit that I can't break, you're the feeling I can't put down. It's not angry that it's longing. Louis sings not about love lost, but love that's impossible to quit. The kind that lingers in your chest even when you try to move on, even when you have to. Then came Always You, a song that seemed to trace the arc of an entire journey. I went to Amsterdam without you, and all I could do is think about you. He lists cities, moments, attempts to forget, but always circles back. It was always you. That line struck fans like lightning. A declaration not just of memory, but priority. No matter what happened, no matter where he went, the heart always returned to one person. But who? Two of Us was perhaps Lewis's most open-wound. Written after the death of his mother, it's a powerful letter of grief. But there's a verse that fans believe could hold double meaning. I'll be living one life for the two of us. Some read it as a promise to his mother. Others, more quietly, think it could also be for someone he had to leave behind. someone he loved so deeply that their absence became part of his everyday. Together, Harry and Lewis built soundtracks of silence, separate albums that felt like two ends of the same conversation. One voice reaching out in metaphors, another answering in melancholy, like they were writing to each other from opposite shores. Even their musical styles mirrored this divide. Harry with his poetic glam rock sorrow, layered in velvet and ambiguity. Lewis with his stripped-down honesty, more direct, more bruised, more grounded. There were no official statements, no names.No confirmations, but there were signs. In interviews, both of them referenced unnamed people who inspired their music. Both avoided gendered pronouns. Both described private stories they weren't ready to share. And both, at one time or another, said, "Some things are better left unsaid." But fans kept listening. And in that listening, they heard more than heartbreak. They heard history. They heard tension. They heard guilt. And most of all, they heard love. Not the love we see in headlines. Not the glittering red carpet kind, but a quieter love. The kind that doesn't need to be seen to be real. Maybe that's what the songs were for. Not to confess, not to expose, but simply to remember. To carry forward what couldn't survive the spotlight. To give voice to what was once too dangerous to say out loud. And maybe, just maybe, music was never about telling the whole story. Maybe it was about leaving behind the pieces, so that someone somewhere could put them together. Belief is a powerful thing. It can start as a whisper, a passing thought, a quiet question. But in the right hands, belief grows. It becomes movement, identity, obsession. And in the case of Harry Styles and Louis Tomlinson, it became one of the most passionate, persistent, and polarizing fan movements in the history of pop culture. The Larry fandom was born not from headlines, but from moments. Moments between two people that felt unfiltered. Moments where time slowed, where a glance, a laugh, a single lyric felt like a secret slipping through the cracks. It began innocently, a few Tumblr posts, some gifs of shared looks. But soon, the internet transformed those flickers of intimacy into a theory. One that Harry and Lewis were not just close, but secretly, deeply in love. A love that had been buried, hidden, controlled. To outsiders, it sounded like fantasy. To the believers, it sounded like truth no one else was brave enough to say out loud. Because this wasn't just about curiosity. It wasn't about gossip. For many, it was personal. The Larry fandom became a refuge for those who saw themselves reflected in Harry and Lewis. People who knew what it felt like to love in secret, to be told to stay silent, to be afraid of what honesty might cost. For them, Larry wasn't just a ship. It was representation, that a story that the industry refused to tell, but which they were willing to write for themselves. They began to document everything, every interaction, every song lyric, every behind-the-scenes clip. They dug into timelines. They made theory maps. They decoded tattoos, stage placements, gestures. They built archives, thousands of pages long. Some even analyzed eye contact like body language experts, treating it like court evidence. And then there were the fanfictions. Stories like Larry Fix exploded online. Thousands of them. Beautiful, painful, sometimes erotic reimaginings of what could have been. They filled in the blanks the real world refused to answer. Some were playful, others were devastating. Together, they formed a literary canon of this secret love. But belief comes at a cost. As the Larry fandom grew louder, the backlash did too. Media outlets dismissed them as delusional. Other fans accused them of disrespecting Harry and Lewis's real lives and boundaries. Some said the theory became toxic, an invasion. an obsession, and the artists themselves reacted in very different ways. Lewis, especially, was vocal that he grew frustrated, even angry. He once tweeted that Larry was never real and never will be. He spoke about how the rumors affected his relationships, how they made things uncomfortable with his partners, with his family. At times, his tone was defensive. At other times, tired, like someone still trying to shake off something he didn't ask to carry. Harry, on the other hand, rarely commented. He became known for his silence on the subject. Even when asked directly, he deflected with grace, humor, or ambiguity. He didn't name names that he didn't confirm, but he also never denied in the same definitive tone as Lewis. To some, this meant he was simply respecting privacy. To others, it meant he couldn't speak. And so the fandom endured, splintered, evolved. Some left, some stayed, some doubled down. There are those who believe Larry was real and ended years ago, quietly, tragically, under the weight of fame. There are others who believe it never ended, that it was hidden by design, that Lewis's public relationships were arranged, that Harry's gender fluidity was a way of speaking his truth without naming names. They point to secret hand signs, matching clothing, mysterious glances at concerts, even years later. And while it may sound extreme, it also reflects something very human: the longing for connection, the need to find meaning in a world that often hides its most beautiful truths, the hunger for a story that could have been not just for them, but for us. Because if two global pop stars could love each other in secret and survive it, maybe we all could. If they could speak the language of longing through lyrics and not be silenced, maybe so could we. If their love was real, even just once, then it means something. It means everything. That's what the Larry fandom holds on to. Not just the idea of Harry and Lewis, but the idea that love, even when hidden, leaves behind a light. And someone out there will always be looking for it. What do we know, really? When it comes to celebrities, especially those who grew up under flashing lights and microphones, we often forget where their truth ends and our projections begin. We watch, we guess, we edit clips, we reread lyrics. But in the end, we are still outsiders. We're watching from a distance. And distance blurs reality. The theory of Larry Stylinson exists in that blurred space. It is part memory, part myth, part longing, part logic. It lives in screenshots, in fan edits, in slowed-down video clips with piano music layered on top. It's rooted in truth, but it may not be the truth. So what is it? A love story erased? Or a fantasy written by millions of hearts aching for representation? To answer that, we have to ask the hardest question of all. How much do we have the right to know? If Harry and Lewis were in love, if there was a hidden relationship in those early One Direction years, then it was something born in secrecy. Perhaps not because they were ashamed, but because they had no other choice. The world wasn't ready. The industry wasn't ready. Maybe they weren't ready. And if that's the case, then the silence wasn't denial. It was protection. But what if there was nothing at all? What if what we saw, those touches, those glances, was just youthful closeness? Friendship misread by millions hungry for something more? Then Larry becomes a lens, that a mirror, that a reflection not of Harry and Lewis, but of us. Of our desire to see queer love where it's been hidden. Of our need to find intimacy in a world that markets distance. Of our ability to build entire universes out of half-truths and hopeful maybes. There is a danger in that. When a theory becomes religion, it stops being a conversation. It becomes a demand, not a claim, not a pressure. And in the case of Larry, that pressure, intentional or not, hurt people. It hurt Lewis. It complicated Harry's silence. It turned something tender into something loud, invasive, impossible to control. But even so, the beauty of Larry never fully disappears. Because behind the theory lies a deeper truth. People are desperate for stories where love breaks through barriers. Where two people can be soft with each other in a hard world. Where boys can love boys, even if they can't say it out loud. Where the music we listen to might just be coded letters, passed between hearts that still remember how it once felt to be close. Maybe that's why the theory still endures. Because whether or not Larry was ever real, the feeling it gave people was. And sometimes, feelings are more powerful than facts. Because in a world built on denial, silence, and carefully crafted personas, belief becomes resistance. The belief that behind every guarded smile, every quiet lyric, every interrupted glance, there may still be a truth. One that no management team, no PR narrative, no tweet can fully erase. Maybe the line between truth and fantasy was never meant to be sharp. Maybe it was meant to blur, to leave space for hope, for heartbreak, for mystery. After all, not every love story ends with answers. Some end with questions. Some never end at all. It's a question asked by millions and answered by no one. Who is Harry Styles, really? To some, he is simply a pop star, a voice on the radio, a face on magazine covers. To others, he's a fashion icon, defying gender, redefining beauty, blending vulnerability with confidence. To his fans, he is warmth, safety, escape, a symbol of freedom, of kindness, of possibility. And to the Larry fandom, he is a mystery within a mystery, half of a love story never confirmed, never denied. But strip away the headlines, remove the stage lights, forget the tweets, the theories, the cameras, the sold-out arenas. What remains? A boy who loved music before the world knew his name. A young man who rose too quickly, learned to smile through exhaustion, learned how to stay quiet when words could cost him everything. An artist who now crafts his identity not through statements, but through songs. A poet whose lyrics feel like late-night confessions, carefully veiled in metaphor, aching with things left unsaid. Harry has always been soft-spoken, but loud in feeling. He has always been private, but his silence is often more honest than words. He has always been seen, but rarely known. And maybe that's the point. Because maybe Harry Styles isn't just one thing, or one truth, or one story. Maybe he is all of it. The boy laughing next to Lewis on an old tour bus. The man weeping at the piano while writing Falling. The person who stood on the cover of Vogue in a dress and asked us, without saying a word, to let go of expectations. He is contradictions wrapped in charisma. He is confidence wrapped in caution. He is someone who has spent years telling us exactly who he is, without ever saying it directly. And maybe that's why we keep searching. Because in Harry Styles, we see something rare, a reflection of ourselves. Our longing to be loved without limits. Our ache to be understood without explanation. Our need to be free, even if freedom comes at a cost. In the end, maybe the truth of Larry doesn't belong to us. Maybe it never did. Maybe it was just a story between two people, too complex, too fragile, too sacred to be shared. But what does belong to us is the feeling, the magic of watching two people connect, the wonder of finding your own story hidden in someone else's song, the courage to believe that love, even if unspoken, still matters. And as for Harry Styles, maybe he doesn't hide a secret life. Maybe he's been telling us his truth all along, just softly, gently, in ways we have to listen closely to hear. Because some truths aren't shouted. They're sung, they're whispered, they're lived. And maybe the most honest thing about Harry Styles is that he never asked to be understood. He just asked to be felt. You're one of us. Stay curious, stay brave. Like, subscribe, and never miss a twist.